Hello and welcome to Casual Learning. I'm your host, John Bannon. Today I'm going to do a video on chapter 2 of my newest book, Superdeterminism Defeats Atheism. You can find this book on Amazon Kindle. This is the second part of my video summarizing chapter 2. I call this Free Will. This is part 2, Free Will. So, free will is the issue that probably freaks people out the most about Dr. Hanson's version of superdeterminism. So, if you recall, Dr. Hanson published a proof in 2020 that the universe is a predetermined static block universe without continuous causation in physics. This means that cause and effect in time is not actually real, but an illusion of our block universe that gives an appearance of cause and effect in time. Cause and effect in time is actually an appearance in the hyperplanes of space-time of our universe, but the hyperplanes are ordered. There's an appearance of order on the face of those planes, and this ordering is what gives the appearance of cause and effect, but it's not actually cause and effect. So it creates this illusion, just like it creates the illusion of time in a very similar fashion. So your decisions and actions do not actually cause the future. Rather, you live under the illusion that your decisions and actions actually cause the future. Of course, it's a convincing illusion, and there's no good reason to second guess yourself. Just accept the abstract notion that cause and effect in time is actually an illusion. We do the same thing with our experience of time. Our experience of time is also an illusion of the block universe, but that doesn't make us second guess our experience of time. We still act as if time was real and not an illusion. So it doesn't really impact your daily life at all. It's just an abstract truth that doesn't really have any practical consequence in your daily life. So it's really not a big deal. Um, because continuous causation is not real, then the future cannot be caused by anything in our universe. So our universe does not contain any actual power to cause anything because continuous causation in physics is not real. But the future does indeed arrive. So it must already exist in our static block universe because it cannot be caused to exist by our universe because it doesn't have continuous causation in physics, which means that the future already exists. It's out there already existing in our static block universe. So's the past. So's the present moment. This is a concept called eternalism. And it's also true. It's a consequence of Dr. Hanson's version of superdeterminism. This also means that the future is predetermined. It has to be because it exists, but it's not caused in time to exist, which means it has to be predetermined. The common understanding of free will is the ability to make choices freely without being constrained by external forces or predetermined factors. Because the universe is predetermined, then you cannot have free will on Earth. Free will in our universe does not exist. It's not true. For example, in a predetermined static block universe without continuous causation in physics, if you think about your arm movement, your arm is a physical object. It's part of the physical universe, which means its movement has to be predetermined by the universe. But if the movement of your arm is predetermined by the universe, then your conscious thought to move your arm must also be predetermined in order for your arm movement to be predetermined, which means your conscious thought also has to be part of the predetermined universe, which means your consciousness is part of the predetermined universe. It's caused by your brain, which is a physical organ. So some claim that our consciousness is the result of a ghost uh, or a subsistent form, some sort of immaterial um, being that inhabits our body but leaves the body at death. But it's responsible for our free will and our consciousness. Well, that's not true. Under Dr. Hanson's version of superdeterminism, under his proof, that can't be true. It can't be. Um, in order for our consciousness to be predetermined, it has to be part of the predetermined universe, which means that our material brain is responsible for consciousness and our decision making, not some ghost or subsistent form. So, because ghosts and subsistent forms are not real, then there is no ghostly realm beyond the thin veil of our reality. So, some people have the idea that just beyond our reality, if you could slice through a thin veil of our reality, you would see this ghostly realm of disembodied souls walking around, sort of like an apparition uh, that you may have read in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, something like that. Ghosts floating around wearing chains or whatever. Um, that's not true. It's not possible. So I'm sorry, Casper the Ghost fans, but ghosts aren't real, and neither are subsistent forms. Dr. Hanson's version of superdeterminism conclusively proves that. But personally, I don't really care about ghosts because they're spooky anyway, and I'm not a big fan of ghosts. And Dr. Hanson's proof gives you something better than some sort of spooky, ghostly realm full of disembodied souls and beings of some sort. What Dr. Hanson's proof gives you is proof that the block universe is real. It gives you proof that the block universe, the past, the present, and the future, probably all exist and will continue to exist and are permanent. I say probably because God could annihilate it if he wanted to, because he created it. But I don't see any reason why he would annihilate it. So I would say it was permanent. So we have a permanent block universe. That's provable through physics, through actual physics, Dr. Hanson's proof. So this is a block universe is much better than a ghostly realm of disembodied spirits. For instance, um, physics tells us that because the block universe is real, the past is still there and the future is already there. That means you're there in the past and you're there in the future, and you're a permanent part of that block universe. And so is all your loved ones and anyone you've ever met. And regardless of whether they actually die or not, of course they die, but regardless of the fact that they eventually die, they're still in the block universe. So they're endlessly living the same life in the block universe. So death is not the end of your existence. Your existence is permanent in the block universe. You're an immortal in the block universe. Well, that's great news, really, because it's provable and it's true. So death doesn't have as much of a bad aura around it under Dr. Hanson's version of superdeterminism, because yeah, people's appearance in the block universe eventually ends. Their appearance ends at some point in the dimension of time, but their whole life is still in the block universe, being endlessly relived. So there's some good advice for you. Don't do anything that you wouldn't want repeated endlessly in the block universe. You'll never get away from it. And on top of that, there's also I'm going to later talk about a proof that God exists and Christianity is his endorsed religion, and Jesus promises an afterlife in heaven for those who are worthy of it. So not only are you an immortal in the block universe, there's also the prospect of endless immortality in another other special universe called heaven after death. So all around, this is looking great. This is a great deal for us. Um, so uh, there's no reason to get too upset about the fact that subsistent forms or ghosts aren't real, because the block universe more than makes up for that. Um, in other words, if you think of the block universe, so here's the Big Bang. Those are like hyperplanes of space time. This is the history of the universe from the Big Bang. Your life is permanently in this fourth dimensional object. So your life, let's say your life is right here. You're born and you die. You're permanently in there. There's nothing taking that away from you. So you're an immortal in the block universe. Well, that's great news. Now, sure, when you die, you don't, after your death, your experiences continuing in this life end. But you can know that actually your life and you continuously exist in the block universe. So, so that's great news. Now, the the lack of subsistent forms or ghosts isn't a problem for Christianity, because Christianity is based on bodily resurrection. That is, resurrection of the body and the brain. Jesus himself, after his resurrection, denied being a ghost. And he said that at Luke 24:39. Uh, so Christianity can get along quite well with block universes and block realities, such as our block universe and then a special unconnected other block reality, such as heaven and hell, in which we are bodily resurrected by God, because God has the power to create other block realities. God has the power to create our block reality. He has the power to create another unconnected block reality, a special one, because there's the physics are obviously special and different and somewhat miraculous, but he has the power to do that. So yes, he can resurrect you in another special block reality like heaven. So superdeterminism allows for everything Christianity believes. So it's fine. You get the same thing under superdeterminism that you would get under subsistent forms or ghosts. You get the same exact thing. Um, the concept of the subsistent form or ghost in the machine was brought into Christianity by St. Thomas Aquinas over 1,000 years after Jesus' death and resurrection. And Aquinas got it after he read Plato, a pagan Greek philosopher. So, subsistent forms or ghosts, that's really a pagan idea that was brought into the church. The original idea was bodily resurrection, resurrection of the body and brain, as seen in Luke 24:39. So, superdeterminism is really just getting back to what Christianity believed all along, bodily resurrection. And it's kicking out an antiquated pagan Greek philosophical concept. Um, so, superdeterminism is great news for Christianity, but it's terrible news for religions like Buddhism or Hinduism. And the reason is that, for instance, Buddhism believes that reality is ever changing, impermanent. Ultimately, it's emptiness. Well, it turns out that reality is actually just the opposite of how Buddha thought it was. Reality is actually a permanent block universe whose beginning and end always exist. So there's nothing impermanent or transient or empty about a block universe. So Buddha got it completely wrong. Buddhism is false, and superdeterminism proves it. Superdeterminism also disproves Hinduism. The ideas of karma and reincarnation um, are devastated by the lack of ghosts or subsistent forms or trans migratory beings. See, the whole idea, one of the ideas in karma is what you do in this life, you get your next life is either better or worse, depending on what you did in this life. So if you were good in this life, you get a better next life. But if you weren't good in this life, you get a worse next life. But that assumes that there's a transmigratory being or ghost that will leave your body and enter a new body upon reincarnation. Well, there are no ghosts. Superdeterminism proves it. So it disproves Hinduism. Um, so when you think about the soul in Christianity, don't think about the soul as a ghost or a subsistent form. Think of it as an information packet that appears in a block reality, in the hyperplanes of a block reality, like this. That's your information packet from one point to a later point in the dimension of time in a block reality. That's what you are. So that's your soul. And that is reproducible by God in other block realities, such as heaven. So that's really how you should think about a soul under superdeterminism. All right, so is the idea of free will kaput? Does superdeterminism end it? The answer is no, not exactly. While Dr. Hanson's version of superdeterminism proves that there's no free will on Earth, there can't be because the future is predetermined and you can't change a predetermined future. So you can't act freely to change something that's unchangeable, which means your actions can't possibly be free. There is another concept, though, and it's a concept I call cinematism. Now, this concept says that, well, God is omniscient. Therefore, God must know all your freely willed decisions in all situations and in all possible universes without having to have to create any of those situations or possible universes in order to watch to see what you do. So God already has this knowledge of your freely willed decisions. And because God has that knowledge and must, then God could predetermine our universe to exhibit what he already knows we would freely choose to do. So even though what we do on earth is predetermined and there is no free will, nonetheless, God created the universe to exhibit what God already knew we would freely choose. So, in that sense, you can think, well, what you do on earth is a reflection of God's knowledge of what our free decisions would be. So, you can preserve free will that way. Cinematism is like a form of Molinism, but it's like Molinism, but applied to a predetermined static block universe without continuous causation in physics. So there is some philosophical basis for this idea of cinematism, uh, and in that way, you can preserve your understanding of free will under Christianity. It's just that it moves up one level. It's God's knowledge of our freely will decisions, and then He exhibits those freely will decisions in the universe, but in a predetermined universe. So cinematism preserves free will wherever it's necessary in Christianity, even though the universe itself doesn't have free will in it. And why would God use cinematism to create our universe, to exhibit His knowledge of our freely will decisions? Well, it's obvious because first off, He could do that because He has omniscience of our freely will decisions, and second, He would want to do that because otherwise it would be unjustifiable for God to judge people worthy of going to eternal punishment in hell if that judgment wasn't based on His knowledge of their freely will decisions. So there's every reason to believe God would, in fact, use cinematism in creating our predetermined universe. So, is living in a predetermined universe without free will pointless? And the answer is no. The point of your existence is not only to be part of God's predetermined plan for our universe, but it's also your ticket to the afterlife, hopefully in heaven. If you didn't exist in our predetermined universe, you wouldn't get the benefit of Jesus' promise of an afterlife in heaven. So unless you existed in our block universe, you never get to heaven. But because you do exist in our block universe, that's your golden ticket to heaven. So yeah, there's a point in existing in our block universe, despite the fact that it's predetermined and there's no free will. Um, and lastly, sure, uh, you're living the illusion of having free will, but it's a damn good illusion, and you can't tell the difference. So, for all intents and purposes, it might as well be free will because you can't tell the difference between living a predetermined existence versus not living a predetermined existence, but living a freely willed existence. Because you can't generally know the predetermined future. So you don't know what you were predetermined to do. So, the illusion is just as good as the real thing. So it's really not a big problem. All right. So, um, that's my summary of the second half of chapter 2. Next time I'll be back with a summary of chapter 3, which is entitled God is Real. So I'm addressing the first point of atheistic ideology, which claims God is not real. So I'm going to prove to you that God is real using Dr. Hanson's version of superdeterminism. So stay tuned. Thanks. Take care.